Good evening, dear listeners. Tonight, we're traveling back nearly a century to a winter night in Kansas City, Missouri. The year is 1935. The Great Depression has changed the country, but downtown Kansas City is still busy. Streetcars move along the avenues, hotel lobbies glow beneath electric lights, and travelers arrive carrying small suitcases, overnight bags, and sometimes nothing at all. High above the streets, inside one of the city's grand hotels, a young man checks into a room. He gives the name Roland T. Owen. He says he is from Los Angeles. He asks for a room several floors up, away from the street, and he arrives with almost nothing. A comb, a hairbrush, a tube of toothpaste. That's all. Over the next 2 days, hotel employees will notice that something about their guest seems unusual. He keeps his room dark. He seems nervous. He leaves a strange message for someone named Dawn. Someone else appears to be inside the room. There are voices, arguments, telephone calls. And then, on the morning of January 4th, a bellboy opens the door to room 1046. Inside, he finds the young man gravely injured. The visitor, calling himself Roland T. Owen, will die the following morning. For almost 2 years, nobody will know who he really was. Eventually, his identity will be discovered. His name was Artemus Ogletree, and even after investigators learned his name, they still couldn't answer the most important question: who had killed him? Tonight, we'll move slowly through the strange story of Room 1046, not as a tale of horror, but as a historical mystery. A story about a young traveler, a hotel room, a handful of curious clues, and a trail of unanswered questions that has survived for more than 90 years. So settle in, get comfortable, and let the noise of the modern world grow a little quieter. This is the story of Artemus Ogletree and the mystery of Room 1046. But before we begin, we'll take a quick break to hear from our sponsors who help us keep the lights on during these dark nights. Ad-free episodes are always available to our Patreon members. Details are in the show notes if you'd like to help support us. We'll be right back with tonight's uninterrupted story. Welcome back, dear listeners. Now, settle in, because I'm going to tell you a story. Kansas City, winter of 1935. Kansas City in 1935 was a fascinating place. The city stood near the meeting point of Missouri and Kansas, and downtown was filled with hotels, theaters, restaurants, offices, shops, and entertainment venues. It was also a city with a complicated reputation. The political machine of Tom Pendergast held enormous influence, while organized crime and illegal liquor operations had flourished during the years of Prohibition. By the middle of the 1930s, Kansas City had developed a reputation as a wide-open city. Jazz clubs could remain active late into the night. People moved through downtown well after dinner. Hotels provided rooms for business travelers, tourists, couples, performers, salesmen, and people whose reasons for being in the city were less easily explained. Among those hotels was the Hotel President. The building was relatively new by 1935 standards, having opened in the 1920s. It was an impressive downtown property, rising high above the surrounding streets. Inside were elevators, guest rooms, telephones, restaurants, public spaces, and the quiet routines of hotel life. Bellboys carried luggage, maids changed sheets and brought towels, telephone operators connected guests with the outside world, and behind the scenes, employees learned the habits of the people staying there. They knew which guests liked their rooms warm, which preferred the curtains open, which ordered breakfast early, and sometimes they remembered the guests who behaved differently. On January 2nd, one of those guests walked into the hotel president. He was 19 years old, but the hotel employees believed he looked somewhat older. He was dressed neatly and wore a dark overcoat. There was a distinctive scar on the side of his head. One of his ears had the appearance commonly associated with boxers and wrestlers. Perhaps because of that, hotel employees wondered whether he might have been involved in professional fighting. But the young man gave them little information. He registered as Roland T. Owen. He listed Los Angeles as his home, and he requested an interior room. Not one overlooking the busy street, but one facing inward toward the hotel's courtyard. The request itself was perfectly ordinary. The absence of luggage was not. He had no suitcase, no traveling bag, nothing that suggested he planned to stay anywhere for very long. A bellboy named Randolph Probst accompanied him upstairs. As they rode toward the 10th floor, Owen mentioned that he had spent the previous night at the nearby Muhlebach Hotel. He said the room there had cost $5, which he considered too expensive. At the hotel president, he had found something cheaper. Probst showed him to room 1046. The young man reached into his overcoat pocket. He removed a black comb, a black hairbrush, and a tube of toothpaste. He placed them near the sink. That was the entirety of his unpacking. Then the bellboy left. For the moment, there was nothing else to suggest that anything was wrong. One of the first people to notice something unusual was a hotel maid named Mary Soptio. She had returned to work that afternoon and entered room 1046 to clean. She was surprised to find the guest there. Apparently, another woman had been in the room the previous night, but the young man didn't object to Soptio cleaning, so she went about her work. While she was there, she noticed the shades were drawn. Only one dim lamp was burning. The room was unusually dark. Soptio later told police that she had the impression the man was either worried about something or afraid. That was only her impression. She couldn't know what was troubling him, and perhaps he wasn't troubled at all. Perhaps he simply preferred a dark room. But then he put on his overcoat, brushed his hair, and prepared to leave. Before going, he asked Soptio to leave the door unlocked. He said he was expecting friends. A few minutes later, she returned with fresh towels. The room was still dark. Owen was lying fully dressed on the bed, and on a small table beside him was a handwritten note. It said, "Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait." Who was Dawn? That question would remain at the center of the investigation. The following morning, Soptio returned. The door was locked, but Owen was inside. She opened it with her own key and found him sitting in the dark again. The telephone rang. Owen answered, and Soptio heard him speak to the caller. He said he didn't want to eat. He wasn't hungry. He had already had breakfast, and he addressed the caller as Dawn. Again, the name appeared. dawn. A few hours later, Soptio returned with towels. This time, she heard two men talking inside. She knocked. A deep, rough voice answered. Soptio said she had brought fresh towels. The voice replied that they didn't need any, but Soptio knew that wasn't true. She had taken the room's towels away earlier that day. So someone was inside, and whoever answered the door did not sound like Owen. That evening, another hotel guest named Jean Owen was staying nearby. She was unrelated to Roland Owen. She had become ill while shopping in Kansas City and decided to stay overnight rather than drive home. She occupied room 1048. Later, she told police that she heard considerable noise on the 10th floor. There were male and female voices. People were talking loudly. There was cursing. The 10th floor was not completely quiet that night, but whether all of the sounds had anything to do with room 1046 remains uncertain. That distinction matters, because over the years, the story of room 1046 has accumulated details from different witnesses and different retellings. Some incidents may have been connected. Others may simply have happened in the same busy hotel on the same night. One particularly unusual incident involved a woman who hotel employees believed was a prostitute. An elevator operator later recalled taking her toward room 1046. She said she had been called there by a man, but when she arrived, the person she expected wasn't there. She wondered whether he might actually be in another room. Later, she returned with a man. They went to another floor. Eventually, both left the hotel. Investigators could never establish whether these events had anything to do with Artemus Ogletree, and so they remain on the edges of the story. Interesting, but uncertain. Then there was another possible sighting. At approximately 11 that night, a city worker named Robert Lane was driving near 13th Street. He saw a man wearing only an undershirt, pants, and shoes run into the street. The man flagged him down. He appeared injured. Lane later remembered a deep scratch on the man's arm. The stranger told him that he had mistaken Lane's vehicle for a taxi. During the short ride, the man apparently said that someone had done something to him and that he intended to kill someone in retaliation. Lane dropped him near an area where taxis waited. After Artemis's death, Lane went to see the body. He recognized the scratch on the arm. He told police that he believed the man he had picked up had been Ogletree, but detectives weren't certain. No hotel employee had seen Ogletree leave the building that night. And so, even this strange encounter remains just that. A possible encounter, not a certainty. At 7 o'clock on January 4th, a telephone operator noticed that the line to room 1046 was off the hook. A wake-up call had been requested. A bellboy was sent upstairs. It was Randolph Probst, the same man who had first shown Owen to the room. The "Do Not Disturb" sign was hanging on the door. Probst knocked. A voice from inside told him to enter, but the door was locked. The voice then told him to turn on the lights. Probst still couldn't get inside. Eventually, he called through the door and told whoever was inside to replace the telephone receiver. He left. At the time, he thought the guest was probably drunk. About an hour and a half later, another bellboy, Harold Pike, went upstairs. The door was still locked. The "Do Not Disturb" sign remained in place. Pike had a key. He entered. Inside, he saw Owen lying naked on the bed. He appeared unconscious or heavily intoxicated. There was a dark spot on the bedding. Pike apparently thought it might have been a shadow. He didn't turn on the room's light. Instead, he went to the telephone, placed the receiver back on its cradle, and left. No one yet understood what was happening. Then, shortly after 10:30, the telephone was off the hook again. Probst returned. This time, there was no answer. He unlocked the door, and there, near the doorway, was the young man. He was on his knees and elbows. There was blood on his head. Probst switched on the light. Now he could see blood on the walls. There was blood in the bathroom. There was blood on the bed. He immediately went for help. The assistant manager arrived. Then a doctor was called. And when they were finally able to enter the room, they discovered the full extent of what had happened. Owen had been bound. Cord had been placed around his wrists and ankles. There were injuries to his neck. He had been stabbed in the chest. His lung had been punctured, and he had suffered a fractured skull. It was clear that this was not an accident. The young man was taken to Kansas City General Hospital. He arrived in a coma. Shortly after midnight on January 5th, he died. The man registered as Roland T. Owen was dead, and Kansas City police still didn't know who he was. The investigation began immediately. Detectives examined the room carefully. One of the most striking discoveries was what wasn't there. There were no clothes in the closets or drawers. There were no obvious personal belongings. The only trace of another piece of clothing was a label from a necktie. Investigators also found a hairpin, an unused cigarette, and a broken drinking glass. One glass remained intact. Another had been damaged. There was also a bottle containing diluted sulfuric acid, and fingerprints were discovered on the telephone. 4 of them were small enough that investigators thought they might belong to a woman. They couldn't match them to Ogletree or to the hotel employees known to have entered the room. The mystery deepened. Police contacted Los Angeles authorities. There was no record of Roland T. Owen living at the address he had provided. His fingerprints were sent to federal authorities. Newspapers began carrying the story. The 2 Kansas City evening newspapers placed it on their front pages. Soon, wire services carried the mystery across the country. Photographs were distributed. People began contacting police with possible identities. Most were wrong. One man claimed the body was that of his cousin. His sister came to see the body and explained that the cousin had actually died years earlier. Another man said the victim had approached him about wrestling under the name Cecil Werner. That lead went nowhere. Police worked through the possibilities. Who was this young man? Why had he been using false names? Why had he traveled without luggage? Who was Dawn? And why had someone apparently removed his clothing and belongings from the room? Eventually, the answer to one question came. The man's real name was Artemus Ogletree. Artemus had been born in Florida in 1915. His family later lived in Birmingham, Alabama. In 1934, when he was 17, Artemus left home with a friend named Joe Simpson. The 2 young men hitchhiked west toward California. Artemus kept in contact with his family. He wrote home. His mother knew about his travels. And then he disappeared. a photograph of the unidentified man eventually appeared in a national publication. A friend of Ruby Ogletree, Artemus's mother, saw it. Ruby immediately noticed something familiar. There was a distinctive scar on the side of the young man's head. She knew where it came from. As a baby, Artemus had suffered an accident involving hot grease. The scar had remained throughout his life. It was one of the details that allowed his mother to recognize him. By late 1936, the unidentified man from room 1046 was finally known. He was Artemus Ogletree. But the discovery of his identity created another mystery, because Ruby had received letters from Artemus after he was already dead. The first letter arrived only weeks after the murder. It was typewritten. Ruby immediately found that strange. Artemus didn't know how to type. His previous letters home had been handwritten. The wording also seemed wrong. The tone didn't sound like the young man she knew. Another letter arrived later. It indicated that Artemus was going to Europe. A subsequent special delivery letter said that his ship was leaving. The letters had been sent from New York. Then came the telephone call. On August 12, 1935, Ruby received a long-distance call from Memphis. The caller identified himself as Godfrey Jordan. He claimed that he had met Artemus in Cairo. According to the caller, Artemus had saved him from a group of thugs. He said Artemus was living in Cairo, had married a wealthy woman, and was doing well. The conversation lasted approximately 45 minutes. Ruby was not convinced. She eventually became convinced that the caller was actually Joe Simpson, the young man Artemus had left home with. Years later, she confronted Simpson. She remained certain that she recognized his voice, but her suspicion was never established as fact. And this is where the story becomes especially difficult, because there were clues, but clues are not proof. Another possible lead involved a man named Joseph Ogden. In 1937, Ogden was arrested in New York for another murder. One of his aliases was Donald Kelso. That name immediately caught the attention of Kansas City investigators. Donald, Kelso. The name seemed familiar. And Kansas City police believed handwriting samples connected Ogden to the letters associated with Artemus. For years, this became one of the most compelling theories surrounding the case. But the story didn't end there. When the FBI later reviewed the evidence, it concluded that the signature of Donald Kelso on the hotel registration was not written by Joseph Ogden. No charges were ever filed against Ogden in Artemus Ogletree's death. So although Joseph Ogden remains an intriguing figure in the history of the investigation, we cannot honestly say that he was the killer. The evidence simply doesn't allow that conclusion. And there is another possibility. Ruby Ogletree had her own theory. She suspected Joe Simpson. Her son had left home with Simpson. She believed she recognized the Memphis caller as Simpson, and she remembered his reaction when she confronted him. But again, suspicion is not proof. Whether either of these men knew what happened to Artemus remains unknown. Before Artemus was identified, there was another strange episode. His body had remained at a funeral home for weeks. Authorities had no family to contact. Eventually, plans were made to bury him in a potter's field. Then, an anonymous man called. He asked for the burial to be delayed. He said he would pay for a proper funeral. The caller also offered an explanation. He claimed that Owen had been unfaithful to one woman while engaged to marry another. According to him, the women and the caller had arranged the meeting at the hotel as an act of revenge. He reportedly said that cheaters get what they deserve, but investigators never established whether this story was true. The money did arrive. $25 was sent to the funeral home, and flowers were ordered. 13 American Beauty roses. They arrived with a card. The handwriting had apparently been disguised. The message read, "Love forever, Louise." The funeral took place at Memorial Park Cemetery. Police detectives attended. Some served as pallbearers. Others watched the grave afterward, hoping that whoever had arranged the funeral might appear. No one came. The mystery of Louise was never solved. Over the years, several theories have developed. Perhaps Artemus had become involved with someone who wanted revenge. Perhaps the anonymous caller was telling the truth. Perhaps Dawn was a friend. Perhaps Dawn was an enemy. Perhaps the strange visitors were connected to organized crime. Perhaps the mysterious woman seen at the hotel knew more than she ever told police. Or perhaps some of these events had nothing to do with Artemus at all. That is the difficulty. The case contains so many unusual details that it's tempting to connect every one of them. But investigators themselves could never establish those connections. We know that Artemus used aliases. We know he stayed at several Kansas City hotels. We know he had shared a room with another man at the St. Regis. We know that someone called him Don. We know that witnesses heard another man in room 1046. We know that Artemus was severely injured. And we know that someone later went to considerable effort to make his family believe he was alive. But we don't know who did those things. The police continued reviewing the case for years. Different detectives returned to it. New leads were considered. Old suspects were reconsidered. Eventually, the case grew cold, and no one was ever charged with Artemus Ogletree's murder. Even decades later, small fragments of the mystery continued to surface. In the early 2000s, a Kansas City historian received a strange telephone call from someone who said they had discovered a box belonging to a deceased elderly person. Inside were newspaper clippings about the Ogletree case. The caller also said there was an object in the box that had been mentioned repeatedly in stories about the murder. But the caller wouldn't say what the object was. Then the conversation ended. Another small mystery. Another unanswered question. More than 90 years have passed since Artemus Ogletree entered room 1046. The city around that hotel has changed. The technology has changed. The methods available to investigators have changed. Today, fingerprints can be searched digitally. DNA can identify people who were unknown for generations. Telephone records can reveal connections. Security cameras can preserve movements that would once have existed only in someone's memory. But none of those things existed in 1935. Investigators had hotel registers, witness statements, telephones, newspapers, fingerprints, and whatever memories people were willing to share. Perhaps the truth of room 1046 was once known by several people. Perhaps someone knew exactly who Artemus was meeting. Someone may have known why he was using another name. Someone may have known why his belongings disappeared. Someone may have known who Dawn was. Someone may even have known who wrote the letters to Ruby. But those people grew old, and eventually they were gone. What remains are the fragments. A young man traveling across America, a hotel room overlooking an interior courtyard, a darkened room, a pencil note, a telephone call, a mysterious visitor, 13 roses, a name that wasn't really his, and a mother who waited for answers. Perhaps that is why this case continues to linger. Not because every detail is frightening, but because the mystery feels so close to resolution. We can see pieces of it. We can follow the trail. We can even identify people who may have known something. And still, the final answer remains just beyond reach. Artemus Ogletree entered room 1046 using a false name. He left it without his belongings. And for nearly 2 years, he remained a man without an identity. His mother eventually gave him his name back, but no one ever gave her the full story of what happened to her son. Perhaps the truth is still waiting somewhere in the quiet corners of the past, hidden among the people, places, and memories that disappeared long ago. We may never know exactly what happened to Artemus Ogletree or who was with him during those final hours. But his story remains, a small mystery preserved in the pages of history, reminding us that some questions simply outlive the people who could have answered them. Until next time, sleep well. True Crime Sleep Stories is hosted and created by Kelli Brink, produced with the support of our dedicated team. Subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform to help us keep telling these haunting tales. Visit patreon.com/Kelli Brink for exclusive content and to join our community. Thank you for listening, and we'll meet you in the shadows next time. Until then, stay safe out there and lock your doors. Good night.